So first of all, good morning, and thank you all for being on the call. Erev Pesach, and want to thank you for making time for it. And Rhiannon, I want to thank you for hosting. So let's jump right into it. We'll thank God for the gift of learning Torah together, and then we'll look at this poem. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. So how many of you happen to have taken in Rachel Korasim's class from this past Shabbos morning? So many of you did, and then a bunch of folks I can't see their faces on here. So what I want to do is just briefly, because it's the context for the poem that we're going to be looking at today, share with you a few word pictures from her class. So she talks about the riots that took place in a neighborhood in Haifa in 1959 and Wadi Salib. And the first picture is a picture of Arab buildings with Arab windows, you know, the shape of Arab windows. And you can see that the windows, the place where the windows used to be, the windows are no longer there. And either they're just empty, no windows, or they're boarded up. So you see kind of an ancient or old, multi-year-old Arabic architecture that is run down with broken windows or no windows or boarded up windows. And then behind those buildings with the broken windows or no windows, you see a gleaming new modern structure. That was Rachel Korasim's first picture. So it just kind of shows you the gentrification of Wadi Salib even today, that there is poverty and disrepair literally coexisting adjacent to a gleaming new building. Wealth and poverty in the same neighborhood. That's not a unique story, but it's very much the story of Wadi Salib today. Then she takes us on a history tour. All of this is for our poem today, a history tour, and she shows how in 1948 in Milchemet HaShichrur, the Arab residents of Wadi Salib fled. And you see Arabs who used to live in Wadi Salib leaving. And then you see buildings being emptied out, and then you see empty buildings. So she starts with the current story of gentrification, then she goes back to 48, and you see the buildings emptied and the residents leaving. And then she talks about the residents, the Olim from Morocco, Mizrahi immigrants. And basically the story here, and you've heard about it and you read about it in Danny Gordis's book, is a story of, among other things, racism and prejudice, where we're the purveyors of it, not the recipients of it. That is to say that the people that are on Israel's Mount Rushmore, Golda Meir and David Ben-Gurion, wrote things and said things that we have their exact quotes, referring to fellow Jews from Morocco as dirty, as primitive, as uneducated, as potentially carrying disease, as a problem to be managed, not a people to be welcome, but as a problem to be managed. And in fact, she had one particular, if you happen to have seen the class, you know this, she had one particularly gruesome quote of just hatred and prejudice. And she asked, who was it who said this? And the answer was Golda Meir. And that was the context for this. And the Moroccan Jews were put in these ma'abarot, these transit camps. And hold on to that because you'll need that for the poem. These were, number one, in the periphery, and number two, they were transitory, cold, not a lot of protection. She made the point that 48, 49 was a very cold winter, and they were in these tent cities that had not warmth. And then the Moroccan Jewish immigrants decided they would leave these tent cities where they were cold and it was just below what they were expecting, below what they had in Morocco, and they just squatted in the homes left over by the Arab residents of Wadi Salib who had left Wadi Salib during the war. So you now have old Arab homes that are being lived in by new Olim from Morocco. Just drop a footnote, and now we're about to get ready for the context of this poem. One of the members of this class who comes in person in room 2425, who is extremely conservative, very right of center views. When I asked the general question, what did you think of the class? He raised his hand and he said, I had never before really had empathy for Palestinians or Arabs in Israel. I always just thought it was a war, and people win in war and they lose in war and they lost in war. And so it is, that's the human condition. And then he said, but when I saw these Arabs leaving their home, and then you see their home being occupied by Moroccan Jews, he said, if I was them, I would hate Jews too. And he said, if somebody did that to my home in Wellesley, and now I don't live there anymore, and somebody else from another land takes my home, I understand why they would have an eternal hatred for my people. So it was a very emotional class, and the story is that, and her point is that there were riots in Morocco, in Haifa, between the Moroccan Olim and the Ashkenazi law enforcement and Ashkenazi police. They were triggered by an incident with a policeman who there was some kind of an altercation with a Moroccan Jewish man in June of 1959, but this was just a symptom of a deeper disease, of a deeper illness and dysfunction, societal dysfunction, and riots broke out as a result of this in Wadi Salib between the Moroccan immigrants and the white Ashkenazi law enforcement. That is what occasioned Golda Meir's particularly horrible quote. And Rachel Korasim's point in all of this is that the past is not dead, it's not even past, that what's happening today is a direct connection to 1959, and that Ben Gvir, who is not broadly liked in our circles, certainly the protesters see him as anathema. His strongest support comes from the Moroccan community. The children and grandchildren of these Olim love Ben Gvir because he's sticking it to the Ashkenazi authorities. And you can't understand the whole thing unless you understand this sociology and this history. By the way, Micha, in his talk on Sunday, also pointed out that the judicial reform, the issues on the merits, are, in Micha's word, a proxy for the underlying sociology, the underlying history, the underlying discrimination, and the fact that there's never really been atonement for it. So that's the context for this poem. Let me just pause and see if there's any thoughts, comments, or questions, and then we'll get into the poem. Anybody have any thoughts, comments, or questions? Okay, we are going to then look at the poem, and I'll ask my friend Rhiannon. So Balfour Hakak, as Rachel Korasim points out, is not from Morocco, but from Iraq, but part of the Mizrahi immigration, a person of color, a person who's not a white Ashkenazi Jew from Poland. And this is his poem, okay? And you'll note in my questions in the teaser, this is in a playful dialogue with the Joseph story, Joseph and his brothers. And the question is, what does it mean in its own context? What does it mean today, okay? When we came to the new land, they saw the striped coats we were wearing, and they made us take off our striped coats. There was also a golden seal on the hem of the coats. They also said, let us see what the dreams will be. When we came to the new land, we were silent and whispering. We are seeking our brethren. Dark was that day. Our brothers did not see our soul's trouble, nor did they hear. Nowadays, when we are singing in the public squares and the beautiful halls for the chief butler and the chief baker, we set our brethren in front of us pleasantly. our striped coats always on us. In hours of troubled sleep, during lightless minutes, sometimes we still remember the pit. Okay, so thank you. Oh, actually, let me just, Rihanna, let me just have you go back to the poem for one more second. And I want to show something visually. If you look, can you go to the top of the poem, please? Thank you. So the top of the poem, you have Ma yihiyu hachalamot. What will be with these? What will these dreams be? What will be with these dreams? Okay. Ma yihiyu hachalamot. What will be with these dreams? And literally the title is at the top of the page, kind of suggesting a heavenly firmament. Okay. And then if you can go down to the bottom of the poem, please. Thank you, Rina. Keep going, keep going. At the bottom, the last word is et habor, the pit. So even just visually on the page, and we'll talk about existentially in terms of the human heart, you have dreams up here, and then you have the pit down here. Okay, thank you, Rhiannon. So now, dear class, I would love you to be the interpreter of dreams and the interpreter of poetry. What is this poem about? What is its message? And why is it in playful dialogue with the Joseph story? Any takers? Any takers? Okay. Okay, I'll ask some more granular. Oh, thank you, Maddie. Maddie, you're up. Thank you.
I have to.
And good morning, Alice. I'm glad that you are here from the holy city of Washington, and you brought Lizzie with you. Good morning, both of you.
Good morning. Good morning. So I have a question. Why is the word striped in bold?
Yeah, that is something that I think Rachel must have done in the translation. It's not in bold in the original, but let's talk about that. In the Hebrew, there is ketonet hapasim, which of course is the coat of many colors that Jacob makes for Joseph. Okay, so what you have here is first of all, you have literally the same language, and it's repeated twice, right? Ketonet hapasim, and then katnot hapasim. The next line is plural, striped coats, and then if you look at the penultimate paragraph, you have ketonet hapasim again. Okay, and so obviously one of the keys to understanding this poem is understanding that. So in the story of Joseph and his brothers, what is the function of the striped coat? Who gets the striped coat, the favored brother or the disfavored brother? Anybody? In the Joseph story, who gets the ketonet hapasim? Who gets the striped coat?
Youngest Benjamin.
Right, Joseph gets it, right? Joseph it's a sign of his parental favoritism, right? And so in the Joseph story, the ketonet pasim is given by Jacob to Joseph to show, how much Jacob loves Joseph, right? The ketonet pasim is it becomes a wedge issue between Joseph and his brothers. They hate him all the more because he's wearing it. He also is 17. He does not have the emotional intelligence to know it's probably not a good idea to wear the ketonet pasim and to parade his father's favoritism. So he wears it, and it inflames the brothers, and they hate him even more, right? So it's a very charged thing. And then when the brothers sell him into slavery, and they don't want to say to their father, hey, Dad, we sold your favorite son into slavery. What do? They try to present him as being killed by a wild animal, and they take that self-same ketonet pasim, dip it in blood, and then say to Jacob rather, hey, Dad, we don't know what happened to Joseph. All we have left is his coat. It's bloody. What do you think? And of course, the clear implication is that Joseph was eaten by a wild animal. And this is what remains. So you have in the original story, the Ketonet Pasim is a sign of the favored son. It creates deep enmity between the favored son and the other brothers. And in the end, it is used for the big lie that Joseph was killed by animals. Okay. Now, in this story, in the poem by Balfour Hakak, he uses the same language of Ketonet Pasim 3 times. What is the function of the Ketonet Pasim in this poem? Anybody? Harriet, please.
I think it's used to show that they were different.
Right. Their distinctive garb, right? A couple of weeks ago when Shira and I were in Williamsburg, and you walk in Williamsburg and through the Satmar section, the Hasidic section, you see the garb, the clothing of Hasidim is distinctive. So these Moroccan Jews, it just shows their difference. And when they come wearing their clothing, we're Moroccan Jews wearing Moroccan Jewish clothing. And what do the Israeli Ashkenazi, extant power structure do? They make us take off our striped coats. And then they also said, let us see what the dreams will be. And in other words, that it was in this poem, like in the original story, the coats become a symbol of enmity, of antagonism among brothers. And here it's they're not the favorite. It's not the coat of the favored son or the favored brother. It's the coat of the different brother, of the immigrant brother, of the new Oleh. And the more powerful force are the Ashkenazim who are there. They take off the coat. You're putting us in our place. We haven't arrived yet. We haven't really made it. Our legs are shaky, and you take off the striped coat. Now, 2 stanzas later, now they're back to wearing their striped coats. So it feels like they are able to reclaim their culture. And in a lot of ways, the story of Moroccan Jewry and Mizrahi Jewry is the story of a people that was suppressed and repressed and dismissed. And now they reclaim and have become ascendant. And from the chapter on Begin that the Mizrahi voters, who were always dismissed by the Ben Gurions and the Rabbins and the Golda Meirs, they voted Menachem Begin into power in 1977. And the same thing is true culturally. You hear about music, that their music was disfavored, and now their music is ascendant. So now their striped coats are always on us. Ketonet hapasim aleinu tamid, right? You cannot take off our striped coats anymore. The striped coat becomes a symbol. It becomes a symbol of their Moroccanness. The striped coat,
To say something.
Well,
becomes a symbol of their difference. And now they're reclaiming their Moroccanness, and they're wearing their Moroccanness. They're wearing their distinctive garb. But do they feel like they've totally made it? They can put on their coat. They can wear their difference. You can't make us take off our coat anymore. But have they really made it? And then at the end, Odenu zachrim lif'amim et habor. We still remember from time to time the pit. And the poem that is about dreams, it ends with the pit. And even though they've made it, quote unquote, they can wear their striped coats. They don't really feel like they've made it. There's not total peace. They still remember the pit, and their whole history of discrimination is as yet unatoned. Annette Needle.
The poem in English, and I was struck with striped because I thought immediately of prisoners, not of the coat of many colors. And then when I read the Hebrew, I realized what was going on. And they were prisoners, and they still feel, as we've been learning, like prisoners in this country. And one of the problems often with translations is you get the message of the translator and not the original writer. And so here I'm faced with two poems, one poem that maybe says two different things in two different ways or the same thing. And it's so strong for me when I see stripes like that to think of prisoners. It was, I'm faced, well, you just heard my dilemma.
Yeah, I yes, is what I say to your comment. And that I think that Ketonot HaPasim, striped coats, I mean, it's clearly an allusion to the Joseph story. It's clearly, and I think it's probably susceptible, Annette, of multiple interpretations that are all true. It's a yes and. I mean, one interpretation is clearly that in stanza 1, they make us take off our striped coat. So it's a power play. Like, and so to make us distinctive, and they make us take it off. And in stanza 3, they put back on it. And, you know, Ketonot HaPasim Aleinu Tamid, we're always wearing our striped coats. But you think, therefore we've made it. But no, the last paragraph ends with the bore, the pit, the trouble, which has never been a trouble before. That's true. And I think you could also say, and striped also suggests a resonance of prison, and they're prisoners of a society that really didn't want them, really didn't accept them. And in some ways, even though they can wear their coat, they're still in some kind of a metaphorical prison.
Wes, I'm not denying the explanation of the coat of many colors at all.
Yeah.
And I buy it. All I'm saying is we reading something in translation are caught, but yet there's a similar message.
Absolutely.
That's really the point. And also, you started earlier by commenting on the comparison to the Joseph story, and I can't remember the word that you used, but I felt like there was a play on it, that it wasn't that, I can't explain it, but there's something powerful in it that adds to what's going on here in terms of within tribes and outside of tribes within the country. And I can't explain it any more than that. I've had trouble with that, but I think there are many layers of messages in this poem.
Exactly that. So let's go there. That's perfect segue, right? Let's ask that. So the real question is, why is this poem in dialogue with the Joseph story, right? You could ask a counter narrative question. I mean, he didn't have to use Ketonot Pasim, which is just so obviously, you know, an allusion to the Genesis story. He could have used some other tchotchke from Morocco. You know, we came to Morocco with our Moroccan tchotchke. They made us not use our Moroccan tchotchke. Later, we used our Moroccan tchotchke, but we still haven't made it because we remember the pit. He could do a more beautiful poem using a Moroccan tchotchke. Why use the Ketonot Pasim? Why be so intentional about playing off of the Joseph story? So let's just pause for a second. Let's take a look at the Joseph story in its shot. Would you say, how would you describe the relationship, and Karen, I got you next. How would you describe the relationship between Joseph and his brothers at the end, when you're done with the story, at the end, when you close the book of Genesis? How would you describe the relationship of Joseph and his brothers? Anyone? Karen, can you tackle that one? Your hand was up, so I'll
not sure about that. Not sure about that. I was thinking about the beginning of the Joseph story, where the coat of many colors meant a pride that was in some ways a false pride that had to be reckoned with internally for Joseph. But I think, I sense it different. So I'm changing to the beginning. I hope that's okay. I sense it differently with the Mizrahi, with the Arabic or Moroccan Jews, that they were proud they were Jews. They had been, they had a proud history. Actually, the Iraqi Jews especially had a very proud history in Iraq. And they had to leave, and they were coming here. I'm wondering about the image that they had of themselves. Did they feel they were in some ways more deserving than Ashkenazi Jews? And I'm not sure the word, I don't want to use better, but more deserving. And that then they it wasn't an internal process like with Joseph, as much as kind of seeing how Ashkenazi Jews felt about them, like a fall from grace, a fall into the pit, where their self-image was taken away from them, their pride was taken away from them. It shouldn't have happened, where in the Joseph story, it needed to happen for Joseph's growth.
Okay, well, I think that the texture between Joseph and his brothers mirrors or is being played off the texture between Moroccan and Ashkenazi Jews. If you look in the second stanza, there is, and Rachel Korsi mentioned this at the end of her talk on Shabbos, the line that Joseph uses, "Et achenu anachnu mevakshim," I'm looking for, he says, "Et achenu ani anochi mevakesh," I'm seeking my brothers. And they use that line, "Et anachnu mevakshim," we're seeking brothers. And so I think my interpretation here is that the Joseph story, the brothers and Joseph never really reconcile. It is always awkward. It is always complex, and it's never a happy story. I mean, the young story is not a good story. Obviously, they hate him and they throw him into a pit and they sell him into slavery. Then on the back end of the story, Joseph plays the game with them and torments them and has them go back and keep Benjamin, and then Judah has to be the give the speech at the end. And then at the end, after he says, "Okay, I'm Joseph, is my father still alive?" They don't all live on the Cape together. They don't all live on the Cape and have a nice compound and have barbecues and spend Shabbos dinners together. They actually, it continues to be extremely awkward, and it continues to be extremely strained. The brothers live in Goshen, which is farmland, rural Egypt, and Joseph lives in the in Cairo, or the capital, where the palace is. And when he's told that your father is not well, your father is sick, he has to get on a plane and go from the capital to rural Egypt. So they never really, and the Torah says explicitly that he had to come. He was summoned. He wasn't there. He didn't come and stop in on work every Tuesday and Thursday. In other words, even after the reconciliation, they weren't really reconciled. It was still awkward. They didn't really spend time. They didn't have chemistry. They didn't have connectivity, etc. You know this. In your family, you all know this, that the person that you talk to every day, you can talk to easily. And the person that you're strained with and you don't talk to every day, you think you have so much to talk to about, you can't even get through the conversation without looking at your watch. The person you talk to every day, you could talk to them for 20 minutes about nothing. The person you never talk to except for, okay, it's before Pesach, I'll call them, it's hard to get through that conversation. And that's what Joseph has with his brothers. And at the end, when Jacob dies, the brothers are so terrified that he's going to kill them that they come up with this lie. Our dad asked, "Please don't kill us," which Jacob didn't do. But the point of the fact that they lied is that their relationship is still not repaired. And at the end, Joseph and his brothers never really have the kind of relationship that we would want to have with our siblings. They're not on the same screen. They're not in the same screen. And they never are. And I think that that is the message of this poem. That's the same thing with the Moroccan Jews. We're not in the same screen. We're not in the same square. Joseph never really got on with his brothers. His brothers never really got on with Joseph. What William Faulkner says is true. The past is not dead. It's not even past. And at the end, the dreams can never really overcome the pit at Habor. Joseph still remembers the pit. The brothers still remember the pit. They all remember the pit. And the pit kills the dream. And Moroccan Jews have a pit. They have Wadi Salib. They have 1959. And they have the Ma'abarot, the transit camps. And they all know what we know, that Ben Gurion scorned them, that Golda Meir said racist things about them. And they're like, you know, that's what I think about Ashkenazi Jews. You're not my tribe. My tribe is Moroccan Jews. And if I can stick it to you with Ben Gavir, that feels really satisfying. And that's why we're in a pit today. So it's that. So I think that is the complexity that this poem brings out, and the fact that she was able to use the Joseph story just kind of tells us that the current conundrum is part of a larger message. Thoughts, comments, questions? Please, Paul. Paul?
Okay. I'd like to go back to 1897 to the Zionist Congress.
Okay.
And this is strictly an information question. How many Mizrahi Jews were at that conference?
You know,
Were there any?
Yeah. I don't know the answer, but from having read the Danny Gordis book, it feels like the Zionist project in its inception was the product of West and Eastern European Jews. The names that Danny Gordis talked about, from Herzl to Max Nordau to Jabotinsky to Menachem Begin, these are, you know, to Chaim Weizmann, these are Western European Jews or Eastern European Jews. I didn't hear, the first time that I read of Moroccan Jews is after the state is founded, when they come in waves after Milchemet HaShikrur. Now, I don't know that for a fact, Paul, but having just read both the Begin book and the Israel book, I'm not aware, put it that way, of any Moroccan founders of Zionism. I think the Zionist project is a Western and Eastern European project. So here's what I want to leave you with. I want to just note that if, you know, I sent this morning a whole collection of poetry from Rachel Korasim. You have that in your inbox. And I think that poems, you know, it's William Blake, that through one grain of sand, you can see the universe. Through this one poem, you can see so much of the story, both the history and the present story, and the Bible and our sacred canon helps us do that. So I hope that you will be able to, between now and tomorrow night, open up the collection of poems that is in your inbox, find one poem and read up on it and Google it and get some history on it, and then share that at your Seder table. And that way you will be able to talk about Israel rather than ignore Israel in a way that is legitimate and helpful and authentic, but without just getting into a depressing mire. Not that this is so upbeat, obviously it's a hard subject, but it feels like distinctly Jewish to we're people of the book, to be able to engage it through the power of biblical texts and modern poetry. And you have a whole collection of it. Now, what I want to say also is, this is going to be our last class. Today is April 4th. Our next class is going to be on May 2nd. We're on break because next week is Pesach. And then after that, I am in Israel for 2 weeks with Spark. So I will see you again on Tuesday, May 2nd. I want to wish all of you a Chag Kasher V'Sameach, a happy, healthy Pesach, a time of deep healing and bonding and renewing and inspiration. And I will see you in Shul, and then I'll look forward to seeing you guys on the screen the first Tuesday in May.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on this call.
Thank
Erev
you.
Pesach, lots of love, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take
Bye.
care.